In this section, Balthasar looks at the thinker Gerhard Nabel, who wrote a book, The Event of the Beautiful. And most of this section looks at his thinking about beautiful, which Balthasar then says is basically the greatest attempt in Protestantism up until then to incorporate the beautiful into theology. Mostly speaking through Nabel's voice here, Balthasar draws out a very important part that we'll talk about a lot today. And it is about the nature of the beautiful and what it can. It seems like the struggle here occurring is in the wrestling with the beautiful. Is that if we really look into the beautiful, we have to, because it becomes powerful in itself, in that it's so much part of our world. When anyone looks at the beautiful, the danger is always going to be that it is drawn down mostly into the earthly realm without any accountability to the what we would consider theological, having to do with Christ's revelation on earth. So Nabel seems to be aware of this and is trying to discover how beauty stands in relation to this. And so he says, the beautiful cannot from its own resources offer itself and man a closed world in which restlessness finds peace. Myth, which is part of beauty, opens up the realm of the powers, but it is only through God that we can discern whether they belong to the prince of this world or whether they are transparent to the one who overcomes the world. Or to put it in another way, myth opens up the realm of being, which for the Greeks and also for Heidegger is full of divine powers, but which stands in the same ambiguity of being either a transparency of the living God or the idolatrous image that disfigures him. So the danger of beauty, when it becomes overly associated with its worldly definitions, is those worldly definitions can change, as they often do through cultural episodes and different times throughout history. If we are looking for beauty proper in the transcendental, which is directly related to God, which is Balthasar's project here, then we have to look for and connect beauty to that greater reality. Nabel realizes this, he knows this, but as Balthasar is going to say later, he gets caught up in his time. He doesn't have a way to get outside of these definitions, even though he really does have this great longing to understand a better perspective of beauty, because he's also very aware that without that, what beauty can become, how terrible it can be, and where it can lead people astray. Nabel says, if we see man as the author of the beautiful, we lapse into the mainstream of modern Titanism. We forget that we can be free only when as servants we are the recipients of favor. And its association with the beautiful is once again because the beautiful is the lightning flash of inspiration that points us towards something higher. But what is that higher that it's pointing towards? That's what man must get an appropriate relationship with, and what Nable's struggling with here. So he speaks of later that Nabal writes, in his encounter with the beautiful, as in every manifestation of love, man enters God's situation, but not the situation of the achievement of his own, but as a gift of God. In the work of art, man witnesses to creation's well-wrought structure as it encounters him. But the work of art is by no means itself an instance of integral, well-wrought creation, since it is not beyond the fall into which every creature plunges. Art, however, reminds us of creation's golden purity and of God's applause for himself. So we see Nabal here has such a powerful idea of what the beautiful is, what it does to man, what it can, its improper use, its terribleness in the way that it can, if we don't have a way to relate to it appropriately, it can terrorize us. It makes us confused about what are the ultimate sources of things. And so Balthasar is laying out all of Nabal's thought here to show what happens when you don't have the right picture, the right appropriate place for beauty to exist, and what its actual relation is to things. And that's when we're going to come to a critical conclusion here of Balthasar's look at the aesthetics, in how he explains beauty's appropriate relationship that we must consider from a Catholic perspective, and that any theology would have to take into account. So this is going to be a lengthy quote that I'll read slowly and that will break down to some degree, but it stands on its own as the critical piece of how beauty needs to be related, and what Balthasar is going to be looking for, and how he's going to be showing where everything falls short of that. So Balthasar concludes, after giving Nabal a lot of credit for creating the best approach towards the beautiful in Protestant theology up until then, but he says, the assumption throughout is that the world of the beautiful originally belongs to man, and that it is he who determines its content and boundaries. The native country of the beautiful would then be the world, or at most, being itself, but only insofar as being is not divine, but creaturely. In scholastic terms, therefore, we would say that beauty is an attribute of predicated and not of transcendental being. In this event, the decision has implicitly been taken that beauty is not a transcendental like oneness, truth, and goodness, or what amounts to the same thing, that beauty need not be predicated of God in its proper sense. And here is where we're going to hit the central premise of what I believe to be all of Balthasar's thought, and what he's asking in his project of what theology needs to be and why. He continues, but if beauty is conceived of transcendentally, then its definition must be derived from God himself. Furthermore, what we know to be most proper to God, his self-revelation in history and in the incarnation, must now become for us the very apex and archetype of beauty in the world, whether men see it or not. In conclusion, Balthasar reinforces and asks the question: if beauty is not a transcendental aspect of God, if God is not the ultimate one, the ultimate truth, the ultimate beauty, then we risk the possibility of detaching our understanding of God from the highest possible understanding of Him and the revelation of Jesus Christ on earth, and how that is associated to the Trinity, and the Trinity as the absolute foundation of reality. And when we do that, we lose something critical to our theology. We can then create theologies that are more subjective based, more based on experience. And as Balthasar says, it does away to a great degree with the contemplative process that had been within the long history of Western civilization. And then we lose that foundation of the Catholic theology that so beautifully needs to point to the God and revelation of God on earth. I know I sound like a broken record, and I'm stating the obvious to a crowd that maybe already has a good grasp of these things, but that's the interesting thing here, is Balthasar is making a really fine, not distinction, but he's on to something that even so many of the great theologians lost sight of, and that's his project is to do this ressourcement, this going back and going, hey, I'm doing a survey of theology, and I'm noticing that we're losing sight of something. And Balthasar is also able to do theology post-Reformation to see what has been going on in the Christian world since that occurred, since the breakdown of the Catholic theology and Catholic stronghold on the Christian revelation. So he sees that when we have this experience, when we're called to Christianity, or maybe we make the choice ourselves and not really knowing all the repercussions and what it really means, we can lose sight and not see this simple little, not problem we have, but this lack of vision we have, separating us from the highest reality that God was considered to be throughout history. We always ascend to that idea in our, if we're pressed to think about God, if we're asked to explain a definition of God, we will say it's all those high things. Yet we might not actually, as part of our thinking and contemplative process, really be making those attachments and the understanding that we can have if we see what Balthasar is talking about here, that the glory of the Lord, which is the title of his great work, this is about glory and what has to be associated with glory. It's not just a glorious moment that when we were called to faith or we had a conversion or great things that we feel that God has done for us in our life. The glory is an objective reality. Truth, goodness, oneness, beauty, those are objective realities. And what is their relation to the ultimate reality? And the ultimate reality must be formed by these things, these qualities, these realities, because if not, then there would be other things, earthly things controlled by the prince of this world that participate in these qualities and direct our attention away from the highest aspects of what God is and can be. So Balthasar's theology is focused on this. He said, if men can see this or not. So we have a beautiful opportunity via Balthasar's theology to direct our gaze in the most appropriate ways and expand our vision and our contemplation to what has throughout human history been what people are searching for, and then to realize, and then to see, and then to test, and then to feel, to know, to have the experience that we see that and we know that God is that ultimate choice, is that ultimate reality, is that ultimate beauty, then we shall be less likely to be led astray and take lesser realities for what God is. That's the beauty of Balthasar's theology. That's the beauty he's trying to bring into it. And that's what is a beautiful experience to explore.